Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the welcome to me choking on air. That's what I'm doing here. Welcome to the Monday night live stream. Once again, I am going to double up on this episode where I'm going to be using this episode as also my podcast as well. So I'll be stripping the audio out of this and using it for the podcast as well. We've had some trouble actually, me and Thrash Pondo kind of getting together and finding dates that we could both and times where we could both be where we had some free time that was the same time so that we could do an episode on this. Um, and this week's just been tough for both of us, so that's why I haven't did a regular podcast this week, and that's why I'm doing this double up episode where I'm going to be talking about punk rock, its origin, its influence, its history, that kind of thing. But I'll also be looking at the comments section as well and be taking your comments. And like I said, I will be stripping the audio out of this and using it for my podcast for our podcast listening audience, because I do have a number of people who actually just listen to the audio. They just listen to the audio on podcast, and they're not really part of the YouTube crowd, and that's cool. Like I've always said, wherever you're listening, I'm just super happy you're listening. But for all the people who do listen on podcast only, always know that there's more over here on the main channel, the main flagship channel. But again, wherever you're listening to this, I'm just super elated that you are giving Retro Serial your ear and your chance, and whatever donations you make is always, I'm very grateful for all of it. Unfortunately, I don't know where Thrash Pondo Pons is. So last I heard, he was going to be here, and we texted earlier today, and he's not in the studio yet. So, but he does this sometimes where, and I hope everything's fine with him, but he does this sometimes where he doesn't quite get the time or something. But I thought we kind of had it nailed down. So I have not heard from him. In a little while. Last I heard from him, he's like, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight on the live stream." And he said it's going to be at 7:30, and I'm like, "Yeah, 7:30 your time, 6:30 my time." And at least I thought that's what we understood. So he's not here right now. So I want to talk a little bit about about punk rock, but before we do that, this is still the main thing we're doing here is still the live stream. And so I want to say hi to some people. First of all, Daryl Johnson's in the house. How you doing, Daryl? Glad you could be joining us. I'm glad you could be making it for this live stream. And yes, please hit the like button and please hit the subscribe button. Also, Lance Chafin says, "Okay, Daryl, I hit it." Thank you for hitting that like button, and also hit the subscribe button. Let's see. ENC is really into rock. Yes, I am. I am into rock music. I have to admit that punk rock is not my forte, but I do have a lot of respect for punk rock, and it is part of the foundation of what I really do like, and that is alternative rock. Early alternative rock is my main staple of music that I listen to the most of, and the forerunner of that is punk rock. And quite honestly, the reason why I wanted to do something on punk is because it was very definitional of 70s, 80s, 90s. But also, last week, me and Thrash were talking about, what should we do next, and we thought about doing one on Mystery Science Theater, which is going to come up soon. I thought about because I'm going to do one on Lost. I know Lost is 2000s, but I don't care. I love it so much that I'm going to break my own rules and talk about something outside Gen X. But as I started thinking about it, I started thinking I've been doing a lot on television, and I want to make sure that I'm doing everything. This is not just a show about nostalgic television. This is a show about nostalgic everything growing up Gen X. So I really want to do all things Gen X, which would include music. So this is why I kind of broke into the punk rock thing for today. All right, let's see. What I do listen to sounds like something from the video game Road Rash. I like Road Rash. I like that. Um, and Daryl Johnson also says, I don't know a thing about punk rock. Well, I think you might not know a thing about punk rock, but I think you probably do. Let's see, Superplex, Lance. I said, did I say hi to Superplex? If I didn't, hi Superplex. How much did you guys enjoyed Unapologetics live stream? I didn't get to see it, but I'm sure you're asking somebody else. Superplex, Daryl and Lance Chafin says was on here for a few minutes. So we've said hi to them already. I want to make sure. Oh, James Dye is here as well. Hi, everyone. Which right now looks like Lance, Daryl, and Zuper. Yes. So, and you as well. I'm saying hi to you too. Um, and oh, let's see who we got here. And he's, well, let's see here. James I says, not sure how interactive I'm going to be. Not a huge punk fan. I get it. I understand. I understand. It's a very, but it's worth a discussion on all genres of music during this time for a nostalgia channel are worth talking about, whether it be psychedelic rock or whether it be some other kind of minute variant, of rock. They're all worth talking about, but punk is specifically worth talking about. And I'm going to tell you why as soon as I'm caught up here with some of these comments here. Let's see. Hungry Jerk is in the house. Hi, everyone. Hi, Hungry Jerk. Glad you could be joining us. And Superplex says, let's see. Well, that seems like more just talking back and forth. And look who else is here, Keith E. Hello, everyone. I just read the comments and came up to speed. I'm not sure what I'm going to have to input on this either. This does sound like I am not um, like something that a lot of people don't really know about it. Uh, let's see. Hey, E and C, please send text to Yahoo. I can't right now. Oh, yeah, let's see. I will try. I will try to send it to Yahoo to see if I can get you on here real quickly. Sorry, everybody, for the convenience or the inconvenience of what we're doing here, but I'm going to try to get Thrash on the show here. So give me just a minute. I'm sorry about this. Oh no, that's not what I wanted. Oh no, let's see here. There we go. I got to copy the link invitation and I got to pull up the email that I want. And now I've got to push compose and I got to push, let's see, Robert. Let's see. Yes. Okay. I will send it to I'm sending it now, Thrash Pondo. I'm sending it now, Bob. I'm sending it now, Robert, whatever your name is. No, I'm kidding. I hope you can join. I just sent it, so maybe we can get you on here. I wonder if it was a problem here. Says, I know some bands and some of the history. Yes. And greetings. The Daily Dance says, greetings. Hi, Dan. And let's see. Hungry Jerk says, is what at the TV land conversation they aren't selling beer. I told him I had six pack on ice car. I don't know what this is about. I'm sorry. I don't know what this is about. John Doe's here. He says, hello. Hello, John Doe. Glad you could be joining us as well. And who else is here? Let's see. The Foundation 148. Hey guys, hope everyone is well. I hope you're well too, and I'm glad you could be joining us. The Foundation. I'm not sure I recognize the name, so if you're a newcomer, welcome. John Doe says Billy Idol is new wave, not punk. That's one of those ones that ride the line because his first band Gen X was certainly punk rock for sure, and his solo stuff it's new wave in the sense that it came over as part of that second wave generation that came across the pond that became popular when MTV broke. But if you look at a band like him as opposed to a band like, I don't know, Thompson Twins or something like that, I think he has a lot more punk rock attitude to his stuff, to his music. All right, we got Thrash Pondo here. Whoa, Thrash, how you doing?
Oh, terrific! But now my battery's dying.
Well, we'll
Well,
keep you on as long as you can.
and if I
But
have to, I'll hop on the old computer. But I'm here at least.
yeah,
So,
what happened? What happened?
for some reason, I can't get into my Gmail account on the laptop yet. I think I just got to change the password or something. But I still have my Yahoo account. So as long as you send it to my Yahoo account, I can still get on, at least for now.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. All right. Uh,
Shall I start
Sean.
reading?
Yeah, please.
Sean Innes says, "Hey all, I've been thinking about this discussion all day and looking forward to it, as
Well,
have
good.
we."
I'm glad we've got somebody looking forward to it at least because I've had a lot of people. I don't know if you kept up with the comments, but a lot of people are like, I don't know too much about punk rock or whatever. Um, John Collins also says hello, Ian, and I don't know if you can still, if you're still unable to pull things up, but
Yeah,
uh,
I need that new link.
yeah, I did nothing this week that was productive. It was one of those weeks where I did nothing that was productive. Oh, Tracy Rothmeyers is here. I know Tracy's going to have a lot to say about punk rock. Hi, Tracy. Um, Glad you could be here. Love you so much, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say. And Cindy D is here as well. And let's see who else is here. All right. Well, all right. Let's now at some point I kind of have to like bridge, unfortunately I have to bridge the gap between reading comments and then making this about punk rock and talking about the history, the origin, and all that stuff of punk rock. And one of the things that I want to say about punk rock and why it's worthy of a discussion within itself is because it's one of the few musics that went out of favor with the big corporations, but stayed alive. It didn't die. So the comparison for me would be a genre of music that came out around the same time, had about the same lifespan, fell in favor and out of favor about the same time, but also died. When it was dead, except for like some a little bit nostalgia. It didn't stay alive. Where for some reason, well, reasons we can talk about, but punk rock stayed alive. And that other genre of music is disco. Disco came out in the late 70s. It was very much it was very much a whiplash against the hippie movement to a degree. And but when it fell out of favor, it died, but punk rock stayed alive. Now, Thrash, let me ask you
Sure.
this question. Were
Yes,
you into punk rock?
I was very much into punk rock, starting probably late high school, and into the college years.
Okay. What years did you start discovering it?
I'd say 83, 84. So I wasn't in right from the get go, but I kind of was there for the heyday.
Yes, so you were there when it was driven underground.
Yes, yeah, it was.
Yeah,
I was
that
discovering
was
it when it was going underground. In fact, I think that's why I
right.
liked it.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's something to that, that kind of rebellious, kind of like, well, nobody else likes it, but everybody else is copying, bootlegging tapes, or you have to go to some store and get these, get these tape and get the tapes, and hopefully people who normally work in stores know something about music generally. Like if they work in a record store, they know something about it. So they knew where to find it, they knew where to find the stuff. I didn't get into punk rock until I was exposed to it and I knew what it was. I didn't understand it though. I didn't really understand what it was, because my whole, like, when I first discovered music for myself, other than what my mom was listening to in the car, and I've talked about this before, like the first kind of music where you're listening to it yourself outside your family, outside of driving in the car and having whatever being played on the radio, and you're just listening to it. And that first genre of music for me was heavy metal. And so I knew some people, and I actually had a friend who had a brother, and I knew some people who actually couldn't stand heavy metal. And they're like, no, we're not really into metal. We don't really like that. And they played me some music that I didn't understand. And now at the time it was punk rock. And I was like, I don't, I mean, this kind of sounds like metal a bit, but like I don't know why you don't like heavy metal, because this sounds like this, and I can't see why you don't like Motley Crue. And but later on, when Nirvana broke, and in the late 80s, early 90s, when alternative rock started to come out, I started a retro listening to punk rock, here and there. I have to say it still wasn't my favorite genre of music. My favorite, like I said, my favorite genre was that early alternative rock, the stuff right around Nirvana, a couple years before, a couple years after that broke, but it was very punk influenced. And had a very, like, almost a punk ethos to it if it wasn't punk proper itself. Um, but what kind of punk bands were you into?
Well, Sex Pistols. My friends kind of got me to them straight away. Ramones. I know a lot of people don't consider the Ramones punk rock, but they were certainly part of that whole underground movement. Um, those were like my first exposure. The rest sort of came later when when I went to college and got into the whole college music scene. Bands which had actually been around, but I hadn't heard them. Because like I said, I was living on Cape Cod, so it really wasn't until when I got to college where I met kids from Boston who were kind of into that whole urban music scene, had kind of exposed me to it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'd say it certainly started with the Sex Pistols.
Okay. Did you like Minor Threat? Bands like that? Minor Threat, the Dead Kennedys, those kind of bands?
Dead Kennedys, yes. And the Billy Idol group.
Gen X.
I was gonna say Gen X.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. Certainly.
All right. Well, cool. Let me go to some of these comments, and I'm very, folks, let me just say up front, I'm very sorry. I am not going to get to all your comments. I normally don't get to all your comments anyway, just because there's a flood of them coming in. But probably on a program like today, when I've got so much to say myself, it's very hard for me to pay attention to the comments and then pay attention to the stream of thought. So please don't take it personally if I don't get to your comments. But I want to get to some of them, and so but if I pass over some of them or something like that, please don't be upset. I'm trying to double up here. I've got a lot of stuff I want to say about punk rock. And first of all, I want this one to be read. Go ahead.
Trey Throws Minor says, I also love the grandfather of punk, Iggy Pop.
Yeah, Iggy Pop and the Stooges is an MC5. There is a band called MC5, is also kind of considered the grandfather of punk rock. I was just looking up, and for what it's worth, where was I? Well, I guess Thrash is checking out here on us. Um, where was I? Okay, so let me just read this. Traditionally, and I put into Rabbi Google, who was the first punk band? And this is just what it says. Agree with it or disagree with it. It doesn't matter to me. But it says traditionally there are three records that are cited as the first, and first is in quotes, punk rock releases. The first Ramones album in April 1976, the New Rose 45 by Damned in October 76, and the Saints debut album, I'm Stranded, September 76. So those are cited as the first punk rock bands. But of course, things don't come into existence out of nowhere. As we know, things don't come into existence out of nowhere. And so MC5 and Iggy Pop and the Stooges, I believe, are all considered to be the grandfathers of this. So, and we have a friend here, C Rock. Hey, D Mike, Nirvana was grunge. Yeah, Nirvana was grunge. Um, but they had a huge punk rock influence. And as a, uh, so these things are hard to parse out, because anytime you make a comment, you can always find a song or a band that kind of falls outside the category. It's just the way that it is. You can find a band or a song that kind of falls outside the category. And I did a whole episode on grunge rock, what it is. I've done a whole episode on alt rock and what it is. And I will admit Nirvana is grunge, but they were, in my opinion, the least grunge of the grunge movement. They had a much more pop sensibility to them than, say, a band like Pearl Jam or a band like Alice in Chains. Um, and They had, like I said, they had a much more pop sensibility to them. But and they had a much more punk rock sensibility to them. Now the Melvins did too, but it was an evolution. Grunge is arguably an evolution of punk rock at the basis, with maybe a bunch of different rock kind of in, and it had to do with their exclusion in Seattle and not a lot of bands making it up. But a lot of bands that did make it up to Seattle that had an influence on them were independent bands like Black Flag and things like that. And that kind of influenced the scene up there. And so while, yes, Nirvana is grunge, I would say that grunge is an evolution of punk in and of itself to a degree. And I would say that Nirvana was probably more or less the most punk rock of those bands that kind of stuck out, especially I don't know, especially their attitude and their ethos and stuff. Especially Nevermind, and Incesticide are very punk rock sounding. They're dirty punk. They've got that Seattle kind of unrefined, not well kept sound to it. But as far as like a meter and things like that, yeah, they are grunge, but they are a very punk-based grunge band. All right, let's see what else we got. Hey, can you hit comments, Thrash?
I can. In fact, here's a good one right here. Connor says the Cramps.
You're gonna have to take this one because I don't even know this band, the Cramps.
Oh, really? Lead singer Lex Interior. These guys were great. His music was more like what he referred to as punkabilly, almost like punk but with a honky tonk mix to it. One of the coolest things he did is, much like Iggy Pop and some of the others, they would take old songs and do punk remakes of them. Like he does a wonderful rendition of George, not George Lee Brown, Rosalie Brown, and whatnot. He had a great album called Music for Bad People, which is really slick. He's probably best known for you zombie buffs out there on the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack. His song "Surfing Dead" is featured quite prominently. It's probably people's best known cut on that soundtrack. But yeah, they were amazing, and they were around almost from the get go. They actually started in the early 70s. They actually kind of broke through, I'd say 82, 83, but they were around from the get go. Oh, and one more thing that occurred to me as I was getting bounced out when it said low battery, it didn't mess around. What first kicked me off, I mean, I had some friends who were into punk before, but what really kicked me off to punk was its influence in movies. And probably most impressionable was one of my what I call the quintessential '80s movie, Repo Man,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah,
had
okay.
a number of huge. It was sort of the Mount Rushmore of the whole early punk scene,
Hmm.
with Iggy Pop and Black Flag and a number of other guys. So I think if I wasn't a fan of punk rock before that, I was certainly a fan afterwards. And let's see, how
Gotcha.
about let's
Let's read
see.
this one.
Oh, okay, Caroline Maloney says, "Hello, everyone. I'm not into punk rock, but some of my kids are, and their friends."
Well, that's good. That's good. That's good. I'm glad you could be here with us. I'm glad to say hello to you as well.
The foundation says, "What do you think of the pop punk genre? Blink 182, Sum 41, Avril Lavigne, etc. Do you think it hurts or helps punk rock overall?"
Well, let me start with this. Do I think it hurts or helps punk rock overall? Um, that's kind of like a sticky yes or no question. I think that people who listen to that and that's their first exposure, it might help punk in a way because they might then go exploring other bands that are out there. I mean, that's what happened with me. I was listening to the Violent Femmes, of course, and the Pixies, and then, of course, Nirvana when Nirvana broke. But that also caused me to go look up bands like the Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat and Rancid and some other bands that were out there. Sick of It All, and so I would say that it can help in that way too. Um, I don't hate these bands like Blink 182 and Sum 41. I don't know a whole lot about Avril Lavigne, but I know that there are a hardcore group of punk rockers who are like really into the underground punk rock, and that they hate all of that stuff. They hate it all. They look at it as just cheap copies. And of course, I know some of that happens, but for the most part, I'm very favorable to it. I don't think it hurts it in the sense that people who are into it are going to be into it. It's not like if somebody was like a hardcore um, Minor Threat fan or Sunny D fan or Social D fan, that Blink 182 comes out and they're like, I'm not going to listen to Social Distortion anymore. That's so I don't know how it would hurt really. Um, I think I, I think in some ways it might hurt the credibility of the underground movement, but it the, but I don't know if it really does or not, because again, those people who are into it are going to be into it, and those people who are coming in because of some of these more popular bands might discover some underground stuff. For me, it's like, this is going to be a weird analogy, but it's for me it's like so I'm a hardcore gym rat. I go to the gym like almost every day, and of course, on January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, you have this huge influx of people who come in. They're called resolutioners. We've got nicknames for them there. And there's a lot of hate that comes in, but I don't hate them. I'm like, dude, most of these people are going to be gone within 2 weeks. So just ride it out. And the ones that stay, good for them. Good for them. I'm glad that they're going to stay. So I know it's kind of maybe a strange analogy, but that's kind of how I feel about the genre. And some of these bands I actually kind of like. I like some 41. I like some of Blink 182. Overall, with those bands, I'm not quite as big of a fan, but I don't know. That's all I have to say about that. What do you have to say about it, my friend?
Just I couldn't agree with you more. It reminds me of something I saw sort of in the early-ish 80s, when metal was becoming really popular. There was a sort of top 40 school of metal that wasn't really hardcore heavy metal, but it was a but like that's not oh yeah, well it's getting a lot of people into it, it's getting them exposure, it's creating a lot of metalheads that probably wouldn't have been there because they discover this stuff, it sounds good, and then they find the real good stuff. In fact, getting back to punk specifically, the first punk or new wave, whichever you want to call it, band most people I knew was exposed to was Devo. And
Oh
a lot of
yeah,
people
yeah,
don't consider Devo a punk rock group, but that first song, "Whip It," is
yeah.
it sort of it fits the template. But it was top 40. It got a lot of airplay on MTV, and it exposed a lot of people to the punk movement who only knew of punk music in the hypothetical sense. So it, like you said, doesn't hurt it at all. I mean, the
Hmm.
people who don't move on to true punk rock wouldn't have anyway, but it probably, if anything, it got them some that nothing else broaden their audience, if
Yeah,
only
yeah, for
marginally.
sure.
James Dye says, I guess the B 52s and Talking Heads would be considered punk. You take that one because I have my own opinion.
Okay, so punk rock, we have to must understand, was a movement that happened, and at the very beginning it encompassed a lot of bands that were kind of underground bands but sounded different than what you would call traditional punk rock bands. And the Talking Heads was certainly one of them. The Talking Heads was a band that was becoming popular during punk rock and definitely hung in circles with punk rock. And I would consider them like punk rock adjacent, but they didn't have that same sound. But they were part of what was happening along with Blondie. They were part of what was happening at the CBGBs, and they were part of what was happening in that whole underground movement. The real problem is when you have a movement, it's a movement. It's not defined yet until it's almost not defined until after the movement's kind of settled in for a few years, and you kind of pick through these different bands and go, well, was this one punk? Was this one not punk? A band like the B-52s also was part of a movement of Georgia underground movement, the what was happening in Atlanta, and that also encompassed a band like REM, who earlier was kind of like punk pop kind of stuff. So the B-52s was an underground band who was experimenting, doing something different, and they were caught up in that punk rock ethos. They're certainly way more poppier than a band like Social Distortion and the Dead Kennedys, for sure. So that's a hard one. Yeah, I would consider it a yes and no kind of thing. It depends on how you define it. If you define punk rock as a movement, then of course they would be swept into that movement. If you define punk rock as a sound, then of course they would fall adjacent to that sound. So that's how I would define it. It just depends on how you define punk rock music, and Blondie as well, along with that. Thrash, go ahead.
Yes, I was going to say I could consider the B-52s punk, but while Talking Heads were experimental, I couldn't call them punk. It was, but again, like Grace Jones and other acts, more performance piece music than more your traditional top 40 stuff, but not quite punk.
Yeah, the sound certainly wasn't not anything similar to what like the Ramones or the Sex
Right.
Pistols. The sound wasn't similar at all, but they were like there when the whole punk rock movement happened, and they grew up and got popular alongside of that. Any other comments out there that we want to focus in on?
Oh, Keithy has a good one.
Okay.
Keithy says, when I was working in middle America, punk was just a way for teenagers to act like they were listening to their parents' music and trying to be outrageous.
To act like they were listening to their parents' music? I'm not
Well,
quite understanding. Go
what
ahead.
what I'm interpreting it is, and poor Keith, he has so many trouble with Syrian and whatnot. But what he's trying to say is is that punk rock was a good way to break from the old fogey sound. It's like, you guys had your coasters, and you guys had your Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, and you guys had boys. Well, now we have this. It created a clear break in the generation gap between the two sounds. And I know
Mm.
because I was really into oldies at the time. And that there was very little reconciliation with punk rock and oldies, with some exceptions, like we were just talking about Lux Interior, or I just you mentioned the Children of the Revolution, which was a cover done by we were just talking about them a second ago. Oh,
Social
the
distortion.
Violent Femmes. No, Violent
Oh, the
Femmes did a
Violent
cover of the
Femmes.
Children of the Revolution. Yes, which is one of their best songs, but it's a cover of an oldie song. So, with the exception of some new wave covers, and as Billy Idol would say, or Sid Vicious, we did it our way. They were two completely different generational music platforms, and I think that's what he's getting at. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah, for
interpreting.
sure. Okay. All right. Well, I will take your interpretation because I didn't quite understand it. Yes. What about some of these other bands? Look, this one right here.
Sean, and it says 7 seconds.
I remember them. They were pretty good. I listened to one album, I think. I don't know if they even had more than one. I knew of one, but there were so many, like when alt rock exploded, and again, that was the doorway for me into punk rock. Um, uh, there were so many bands, there were so many things being thrown at me that it was difficult to keep up with everything. And then, of course, there were some things that I listened to and loved immediately. My doorway into alternative rock was the Violent Femmes. That was well, there were on MTV. There were some other bands that were coming out. Like I said before, the Cult, was kind of like they were like were they new wave? Were they rock? Were they what were they? They were blues, um, and of course,
The
um,
Cure, the Smiths.
yeah, the Cure, the Smiths, those kind of things were all coming out. But there was a girl, but at the time, like I was trying to be the next Vince Neil. I had long bleach blonde hair, a stoner, the stoner jacket with the concert T-shirt, the jeans and stuff, and the bandana on backwards and stuff around my neck. I was really trying to be the next, like I said, the next Vince Neil. Um, and and I was friends with a girl, and it was in an English class, and I think it was like 10th grade or something like that. And she gave me a tape. She goes, I think maybe you would really like this. And it was a bootleg tape of the Violent Femmes, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with that tape. I listened to it over and over and over again. And then it was after that, shortly after that, that um, Alice in Chains first came out, and Ministry and things like that. And I started listening to that more and more, and started fading out of my hair band phase, and started fading into my grunge alt rock phase. But then when Nirvana came out, that was it. It was over. I mean that was the end of an era for me and the beginning of a new era. And then one of those bands that was thrown at me was 7 Seconds. I listened to it. I can't say that it got heavy rotation, but I liked it quite a bit. Kind of almost um, like a surf kind of punk kind of thing. But one of the bands is this one right here. We gotta check this out.
Trithers Myers says, I saw the Pixies live.
Lucky you. Lucky you. Now, are you a Pixies fan?
Myself, I enjoyed them. I can't say I was a huge fan.
Okay. All right. So I got into the Pixies late. What happened for me was, of course, as these bands were being thrown at me, one person gave me another tape. It was a tape, but on side one was Tool. So this is late now because the Pixies were a later discovery for me after Nirvana. But on the other side, she's like, I think you'd really like this. And the side A was Tool, and on side B was the Pixies. But there was no marking on it. I didn't know who they were. And it was Trompe la Mode, which was their last studio album that they did before they broke up and then reemerged with Indie Cindy. But let me tell you something. I was like, who is this? I was playing it for all my friends because I couldn't figure out who it was. I knew it wasn't the same band on side A because side A was Tool. And I just flipped out. I was like, this is the best. They're still one of my all-time favorite bands, the Pixies. And so that was my first exposure to them. Unfortunately, I was exposed to them after they broke up. But did you hear Indie Cindy? Have you heard Indie Cindy yet? I mean, it's like, I don't know, 7-8 years old.
No, I have not.
Okay. All right. That's the newer one that they did after 25 years of not doing another studio album. And anytime a band doesn't do a studio album in that long, you're kind of worried that they are going to suck, that it's just going to be a rehashing of, I mean, it is a phenomenal album. It's phenomenal. They picked up right where they left off. Everything about that album was great. I highly recommend it. All right. What else do we have, Thrash? You choose our next comments here.
We have a two-parter from Sean Innes. It took me a second to realize it was a two-parter. We have Dangerous Type by The Cars, Grinding Halt by The Cure, Pretty Boys by Joe Jackson, Talk of the Town by The Pretenders, Walk Hard by Stro, Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed, but that's on to part two. So I'm going to leave part one up while you address that, and I will queue up part two when you are done.
Well, all great songs, all great hits. Some of them could be considered post-punk. That was kind of another, like Joy Division and things like that were kind of considered post-punk. There was certainly 80s punk, and then there was something like post-punk, which have been bands like The Cure and some of these other bands, The Cars, things like that. These are all really good stuff. Anything you want to say about this, Thrash?
Well, just the one that jumped out at me was Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed, which a lot of people avoid because it is, let's just say, very colorful in its content. But as far as that early sound that was sort of the kickoff for the whole punk movement, I'd say that was probably the most influential of the works that you mentioned here. And I'm now going to go on to phase two, which was, so it was The Same Old Scene by Roxy Music, Pissing in a River by Patti Smythe, Life During Wartime by the Talking Heads, Take This Town by XTC, Down in the Park by Gary Newman. Incredible song.
Yeah, all very good stuff. So, yeah, really good stuff. TXC, that was an interesting band. Did you? They were pretty interesting.
They really were.
Yeah.
They really were. They're one of those bands that all of a sudden they just disappeared. I'm like, what happened to them? They probably continued making albums that just weren't getting a lot of airplay on the radio. That happened a lot, I'm afraid. Even the underground station began to sell out.
Yeah. Patti Smith, infamous in punk rock industry. The Talking Heads, again, one of those bands that, again, not it was there at the movement of punk, but it sounded very different, very experimental. Gary Newman, yeah, good stuff there as well. Um, I was going to say something about this, but I totally forgot what it was that I was going to say. I completely escapes me. There was something that I was going to hit on there, but anyway, oh well, we can go on.
We can. You can. You can always go back to it later on. I want to read this in the record. Chiffin says, speaking of the Violent Femmes, that has to be their biggest hit, I believe.
Yeah, for sure.
Airplay.
Yeah, it certainly did. It certainly did. That was a great song. That album is really good. Unfortunately, like I do like a lot of their other stuff too, but nothing ever really did as good as that. I liked that album, that Violent Femmes album. Their other stuff was good, but it just did not capture my attention the way that album did. What about the Dead Milkmen? Did you like the Dead Milkmen?
Oh, of course. Of course. Oh, but I want to get back to this. I think this, because I didn't realize this. We were talking about a soundtrack. Sean Ennis says, Thrash Pondo Ponds, you missed the message about all that music that was on the same soundtrack for Times Square. I've seen Times Square in years. So I'm guessing all those songs on the album Times Square, which is about the whole underground scene in New York. If everyone remembers Tango and Cash with Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell, Jack Palance, Terry Hatcher, there was a song in the movie as she was dancing called Don't Go by Yaz. Is that punk rock?
I'll let you address that.
I don't remember the scene. So you know what, John? Yes, I would consider that punk rock.
Okay.
When in doubt, take an educated guess.
I have no idea. I'm not really that familiar with Yaz. Well, let's see. Tracy Rothmeyer's address this. John Collins. Yaz was considered to be new wave. Okay. All right. I mean, if there's anybody in here who knows their stuff about music, it is Tracy. So I will take your word for that, Tracy. Let's see. Well, what else were we going to talk about? I forgot. Again, these things like they'll hit me and then like we'll move on and it'll elude me. Go ahead. What other thing do we want to talk about here?
Dave Claroni is in the house and says, hi, gang.
Hi, Dave.
And also, music, movies, and more with Brian says, what would you classify pseudo echo?
I hate to sound ignorant, but I've never heard of pseudo echo. Again, there's just so many bands out there that it's difficult to know them all, so I have no idea what pseudo echo is. If Tracy knows, she'll definitely be able to let us know as well. So yeah, I would defer to her or to you. Do you know pseudo echo, Thrash?
I thought he meant bands that were like emulating Echo and the Bunnymen. So in other words, I'm not 100%. Okay. One thing Lance Chaffin brings up Lance Chaffin brings up Berlin, the Metro. And while I absolutely love, would you consider Berlin to be punk?
No, I mean, no, I personally wouldn't. What about you? I think we've got a delay on this old computer.
We do. That's why I was hesitant to go back to the old one. Battery, my new one died, so I had very little choice. I always loved Berlin, and I thought they had some very experimental sounds back in the 80s, but I couldn't classify them as punk or new wave. I would just experimental sound, and that was something that a lot of people back in the 80s were doing. There were sounds that were different from what you've heard, but not really classifiable in any of the new genres. And that sounds like a cop out, but let's just say there was a lot of that going around in the 80s.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of that stuff. I think Berlin for me was a little too mainstream to really be considered punk, in my opinion. So that's kind of like asking, if the Go-Go's were punk. Well, I mean, they certainly had kind of a punk flavor to them, but I couldn't really consider them punk. Although they did, I don't know if you knew this or not, they did start out as a punk band, and and
Yes, I
not
did
only
know that.
not only did they start out as a punk band, guess who else started out as a punk band? I'll let you know because we're on a time delay. So who else started out as a punk rock band was what was their album was the Beastie Boys. They started out as punk and they went into rap, and then later
Oh,
on they
yes.
went back to punk. So, all right,
I did know that. I
what
did know
a
that actually.
yeah. Let's what else we got here?
Brilliant says, "Hey, Ian and Thrash. From what I understand, the Ramones never really got the accolades when it came to their contribution, not just to the '70s punk rock, but to rock in general."
That boy, I don't know, Terrell, because I in any circle that I know, they always get accolades. So I mean, they're one of the people who are mentioned the most. Now, I mean, I don't know if they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or not. I have no idea. But as far as the people I talk to, the podcasts I listen to, the YouTube channels I watch, the Ramones are always credited. So I don't know. I don't know who's not giving them the credit that they deserve to the contribution. So I think I mean I am always hearing them. I'm always giving them credit. I always hear people giving them credit. So I don't know who it would be. I always hear other bands giving them credit. So I'm not sure. Um, did you ever see Thrash? Did you ever see the movie SLC Punk?
I haven't, believe it or not. I have not seen SLC Punk.
Oh no. What's crazy is I was in Salt Lake. Well, I was in southern Utah, but I would occasionally make trips up to Salt Lake for various reasons. And I went up there one time because I was at some, I don't know, youth thing, and I went into a punk rock club, and during that time, during that mid '80s thing, and I walked into that place, and I was just like, I mean, people there with big spiked hair, and I mean, it was crazy, and I was just like, I mean, I I didn't stay long because I was with another guy who was older than me. He was a friend of mine, and he had to go pick something up or whatever, or talk to somebody. And we just walked into this club and then walked out of this club, and it was like, and then when that movie SLC Punk came out, I was just like, well, that's where I was, man. I was in one of those clubs that you see in SLC Punk because it was right around that time that I went there and went into the club with that person, and it was crazy, man. I mean, punk people were slam dancing, and the music was loud, and the I remember this guy walking down the hall, and he had something like a punk rock haircut, but it was more Flock of Seagulls. But then when he got down into it, it was like when we got down into the actual club part of it, it was super punk rock. So I can say I was there for SLC Punk when it was actually happening one time for like 5 minutes. I'm claiming it.
Good one. I never ever knew this before. Sean Innocent entire. The lead singer for Berlin was in the final running for the role of Princess Leia in Star Wars. Across recently, Berlin
Wow.
was more new wave / alternative / pop soundtracks.
Yeah, definitely. They're considered kind of
Wowzers!
post-punk.
I never knew that.
I never knew that too. Well, maybe we'll hit some of these. Let's
Let's
see.
see.
Some.
Oh, we just lost it. Oh, hang on. Music, movies, and more with Brian says, thanks, Cindy. Reality TV did ruin TV, all junk shows, and I'd watch much rather than see sitcoms and or nighttime soaps or something.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We
He
got to
goes on to
get.
say,
Oh, we got. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Shall I start reading now? Okay. John Collins says the scene I'm referring to is where Terry Hatcher, who's the sister of Kurt Russell character, is a stripper and she's dancing to the song "Don't Go" by Yaz, one of the best scenes in cinematic history. I guess you've never seen Dr. Zhivago.
I guess not.
Let's see. I got one here who aren't live when the S3X Sex Pistols were at their party and listening to their music on Spotify.
Oh, well, good. All right. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go through some of these early punk bands. I pulled up some early punk rock bands. I just wanted to go through them. We got to remember the Dead Kennedys, of course, Black Flag. They were really good. The Ramones, the Circle Jerks, Bad Religion, Minor Threat, Husker Du. Oh, so many bands that need us to pause and talk about for just a minute. First of all, let's talk about Black Flag, because Black Flag is the band that you know. Why am I forgetting the name?
Henry Rollins.
Thank you.
Henry Rollins.
For goodness sakes. For goodness sakes. Yeah, Henry Rollins. Did you know that Henry Rollins was not the original singer of Black Flag?
There's a bell ringing in my head, but I don't know the whole story. I know he was very, very, very young when he took over.
Yeah, but the original singer was the guitarist, but the guitarist felt like he was too divided, and so he wanted a singer. He didn't want to sing anymore. And so they brought on Henry Rollins to be the singer for Black Flag, and history was made. So, I mean, good for Henry Rollins for doing that. Apparently, Henry Rollins was working in an ice cream shop at the time, scooping ice cream, and he was a fan and a friend of the guitarist for Black Flag. And the guitarist said, "Hey, I am looking to move out of the singing position and just focusing on guitar. Would you sing?" And Henry Rollins said, "Sure." And again, history was made. And then another great band here that we have to talk about, of course, is Husker Du. Do you remember Husker Du?
Oh, of course. They did an album with it was like a crop with now Susan, the singer.
Almost nothing of what you're saying is coming through. I'm sorry. Like almost nothing of what you're saying is coming. It's all going. So I can't hear what you're saying.
No,
but
it wasn't anything important. Who's going to do a crossover album with Susan Hoff?
Oh, okay, all right. I heard it that time. Yeah. Well, Husker Du was a big influence on the Pixies. The Pixies basically put out an album put out a flyer saying something. They're looking for a band that's going to be like a hard rock version of Husker Du, or Husker Du meets somebody else. I can't remember. but basically they were a big influence on Frank Black. But I like them quite well. And then they're a band in their own right. There's one of those bands that are like 2 generations back for me. It's just like, okay, so Nirvana got me into a lot of alternative rock, and then there was, like I said, then I got into the Pixies after the Pixies had already broken up, and then the Pixies got me into Husker Du. The kind of these things trail off, which is very interesting if you kind of look at the history from an autobiographical perspective of how I got introduced to bands. It's kind of funny. What else? Other bands here? The Clash. You like the Clash?
Oh, love the Clash. Love the Clash. Combat Rock. The first album I actually bought out of my own pocket. A present from your mom, your uncles, but actually to actually buy it yourself. I loved Combat Rock, and so yes, they were big. In fact, speaking of Alex Cox, who did Repo Man, he made a western parody, I guess you'd call it, called Straight to Hell, and Joey Strummer is actually in it.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. It's so sad because a lot of these bands are worth mentioning, but one band that's very worth mentioning is the Germs, because the Germs is the band that Pat Smear was the guitarist for, and then Pat Smear later joined Nirvana when Nirvana became a 4-piece again. Nirvana was originally a 4-piece with they had another guitarist. Well, I can't say originally. They weren't originally a 4-piece. They were originally a 3-piece, but they added a 4th on tour for Bleach. They got rid of that guy, and Jason, oh, I forgot his name. But then later on, he always wanted Nirvana to be a 4-piece because it's always nice to have an extra guitar there when you're doing solo or you're singing or whatever. And then they brought on Pat Smear. So Pat Smear was in the Germs, was in Nirvana, and was also in the Foo Fighters, and is still currently an in and out member of the Foo Fighters. Yeah. So great band there, the Germs. Also a band that was featured in the legendary Western Fall of Civilization Part 1. There's Part 1 and Part 2. Have you seen the Western Fall of Civilization?
Seen it. I've lived it. Nothing. I work with what I got, As far as actually seeing it, no, I have not.
Bummer.
Silly.
The problem is I've only seen clips. I've only seen clips of the first one, and I've been trying to find it to get it Western Fall, because Western Fall of Civilization Part 1 is about punk rock. And it isn't. Well, last time I checked, but things kind of always emerge on YouTube. But Western Fall of Civilization Part 2 is about heavy metal, and I've seen that one. That one is on YouTube last I looked. But Western Fall of Civilization Part 1, you can only find clips of it, and I have no idea why.
Teb says, though not a punk band per se, they're very influential. They paved the way for all female bands that would dominate in the decades that followed and help launch Joan Jett's career.
Yeah, very much so. It's kind of interesting that a band like the Runaways went in so many different directions. So Lita Ford went in the total heavy metal direction, glam metal even, her solo albums in the 80s were very much, that part of that heavy metal ethos. And Joan Jett, even though she got a little bit into heavy metal, she stayed more true to the punk roots. of what she was doing. So, and I always really did think of the Runaways as like just a rock band, just a rock band with some really good heavy and punk tendencies. But it's interesting that Joan Jett went one way into punk, and then Lita Ford went another way into heavy metal, which just shows that at that time, these genres were just beginning to be developed, and you didn't know where it would go. Another band like that is kind of like the New York Dolls. The New York Dolls, like they have a lot of glam. They're like a punk band, but they have glam characteristics. Is all I can really say. There's no police when it comes to this stuff. There's no. I don't mean the band Police. I mean there's no police officer who's going to come down
You
and
caught me
arrest
before
you
I continue.
What's that?
I said I was just about to say that. You caught me before I caught me before I could use my terrible pun.
Okay.
Nothing? Nothing, huh?
Terrible pun. It's just being,
pun.
it's very distorted. You're like, you sound like a robot almost. Like part of the word will come through, then it'll phase into like robot. It'll be like, you caught me. Yeah, before I did it. Kind of sounds. It sounds like maybe like you're secretly a robot, and you don't want other people to know you're a robot.
Computer, I really am not. I'm a closet robot. Yes, I'm a closet robot.
Right.
Hopefully, this will all be fixed in post production. We don't have a post production.
This is unfortunately, this is not post. This is going out live as it is. Let's see. I can't talk to my friend, who is a girl, is calling me right now. So I had to hang up on her.
No. Answer. Put it on speaker. We'll all be like,
no. She'll say bad things about me. Let's see. Let's read this one right here.
Don't we all? John Collins says, Ian, would you say that the album Jagged Little Pill has punk rock vibes because of its anti-establishment and devil may care sensibilities?
I certainly would say it has got a punk rock vibe to it, although it would technically be considered in mainstream alternative rock. But yeah, I mean, for sure, I think you nailed it right on the head. For those very reasons, I would definitely say that it's got punk rock vibe to it. But it does have punk. It does have a punk rock vibe to it, even though it really couldn't be considered. It couldn't be considered the sound of punk.
Sean, this is retro serial ghosting your friend for us. We are honored.
I told her before I started the show that I was starting the show, so I hope I gave her a link. I don't know, maybe she's listening. Or she couldn't be listening. If she was listening, she would know that I'm on live right now. So let's see. Let's read this one. All right, you are totally frozen, so I'll read it. All right. Let's see. I didn't catch the comments, and no telling how Serious Going to Spell Husker Du was a board game called Do You Remember? So Ian's being funny. I didn't catch all the comments, and no telling how Serious Going to Spell Husker Du was a board game. I didn't know Husker Du was a board game. I wasn't being funny. That wasn't a joke, by the way. I was really talking about the band. The band. Um, they were an influence on the Pixies. So I don't if Husker Du is also a board game. That's very very interesting. All right. Was that was that Pap Smear? No, it wasn't Pap Smear. It was Pat Smear, but obviously that's not his real name. I mean, it's a play off Pap Smear, and yeah. So, but Pat Smear, I think it's Pat Smear. I mean, that's the kind of thing that like I get wrong for years, and I don't know too much about it. Let's see. Husker Du, Husker Du, R.I.P. Grant Hart died in 2017. Yes, he did. I do remember that. Um, uh, and then John Collins writes Joan Jett and the Black Hearts. Yes, Joan Jett and the Black Hearts um, were we're kind of like a rock band, but she just continued to have put out that punk vibe, wearing the leather jacket with the spikes on it and stuff like that. And Sean Innes says, I saw a spoken word performance by Henry Rollins a few years ago. Really interesting guy. Rollins was working in a Baskin Robbins and was asked to join Black Flag. Yes, he certainly was. And Kenneth Wilkinson is here. Hi, Kenneth. I forgot to say hi to you before, but I will certainly acknowledge your presence now. Did we acknowledge Cindy D? I guess Lance is leaving. Sorry, Lance, to see you leaving. Yes, but I wanted to say hi to Cindy D if I have not already said hi to you already. And Henry Rollins is very smart. Yes, he is. He's almost as smart as I am, but I don't think so. No, I'm kidding. No, Henry Rollins is very, very smart. Very interesting guy to talk to. I've listened to him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I've listened to him just talk before. He's a very thoughtful individual, a very interesting and thoughtful individual. Let's see. Um, Sean Innes says, music, movies, and more with Brian. I was working at A&E Television Network during their rebranding 2002, 2007, 08. All their influences in reality TV was pretty disgusting to me. Agree with was bad TV. All right, there's like kind of a sub thing going on with bad TV here. Let's see. Cool ENC. I don't know what that was, probably something that you're responding to something I said. I'm glad you thought it was cool, because I like to think of myself as being cool. Oh no, let's see. I'm out. I'm totally overlooked by ENC and Thrash anymore. They did that to me last week. Is someone complaining? Bye, guys. No, I'm not complaining. Please don't leave. I got to you. I saw your comment. I didn't mean to at all. Please, Cindy, don't leave us. I hope you get this before you leave. Um, so let's see. Ian, what is the origin of the band name Depeche Mode? I don't know what the origin is, quite honestly. I wish I did. Anyway, I hope Cindy didn't leave. Oh man, I will make special attention to make sure that I look for you next time as well, Cindy. So I really hate that. I mean, when you get when sometimes when slips through the cracks once, it's just like, well, there's a lot of comments. It happens, whatever. When it happens twice, it's you kind of go, "Well, what's going on? Is there something wrong?" By no means, Cindy. Please come back. Love you. Let's see. I think she's gone. Well, oh, bummer. If anybody knows how to get in contact with Cindy, let her know that that it was not purposeful whatsoever. If you're out there and you have some link with her, please let her know that for sure. All right. And I'm always ignored. I don't think you're ignored, my friend. my Bigfoot hunting friend. I hope you're doing well. And to Bear, Lance Chafin, you can't leave. I just got here. Oh no, you guys got here, and we're near the end of this thing here. Let's see. Terrell Eugene Bellinger says, by the time Green Day released their breakout album Dookie in 1994, the Seattle grunge scene was already beginning to fade. Yes, it was. I remember Dookie when it came out, and I was a big fan of it. And then I actually remembered that that it was that they had a that they actually came out in the 80s. Actually, um, I believe they did. I believe Green Day formed in the 80s, like late 80s. But yeah, it was already starting to fade. But it kind of revived that. It kind of, in my opinion, revived the part of the alternative rock that was that was the most punk influenced. They did come out, they did sound like old school punk, and they didn't sound like they were faking it. I know a lot of people think that they were faking it. But I really enjoyed them. When they came out in 90, well, when I saw them come out in 94, when I got introduced to them, it was very much, it was very interesting. It was very, very interesting. I really enjoyed them. All right. All right. Hey, oh, wait a minute. I wanted to see this. Hey there, RC. Hey there, BK on the air. I'm glad you could be joining us. Let's see. Spamming scene. I thought you were contributing. Okay. Green Day from the Bay Area. Yeah, as I recall, they were from the Bay Area. Let me look back at some of these bands. I'm going to be missing some of these comments here. I think I can get a hold of Cindy. I might have her email. Flipper was another one. Boy Zero, Fear, Discharge, The Gun Club, Susie and the Banshees. I don't know. Susie and the Banshees. Well, you know what? They came out in 76. So they certainly were part of that punk rock movement. But again, I think they're probably one of those bands that were not so much the sound of what came to be known as punk rock. Fugazi. Yes, Fugazi, 87 to 2003. They were certainly they were certainly had a punk sound to them. I'm starting to unravel here a little bit, folks. And I'm starting to feel really bad for what happened with Cindy as well. So again, let me just ask you folks out there, does anybody have contact with Cindy outside of right here? Like, can you get a hold of her? Yes, no, maybe in the comment section. All right. Let's see. Where was some of these other things that you had mentioned here? Terrell asked, how do you feel about punk songs being sampled by hip hop artists? You know, I've kind of sidestepped that for some reason, the hip hop artist thing, like the sampling thing. So I feel the same way about it as I feel about everything being sampled, and that is I don't have an opinion. I don't have an opinion one way or another, really. I've heard artists get very upset that their stuff is sampled. I've heard artists not care. So to say, how do I feel about punk rock songs? I feel the same way as I do about everything. I don't really have an opinion on it yet. All right, let's see. Great topic. Zebra Libra, thank you for joining. So people are saying no, they don't have contact with Cindy. Somebody asked a question about the Smashing Pumpkins, I think a little while back here. Certainly, Smashing Pumpkins has a Green Day, a punk rock sound to them. Although they would be, I would say, I would put them squarely in the alternative rock category. So if anybody asked about that, so for me, Smashing Pumpkins Yeah, they're straight up alternative rock. One of those bands that almost define the category of alternative rock. I couldn't really consider them to be uh, punk rock, but one of those bands that were influenced by punk to a degree that they carry on the punk rock flame, ethos, heart, soul, but they sound very much what came to be known as alternative. Um, and uh, and how do you feel about Green Day and Good Charlotte? Green Day, I loved. Good Charlotte, I don't know a dang thing about. I'm sorry, that's just one of those bands that fell through the cracks as far as I am concerned. What else do we got going on? All right, well, folks, let me just say that if you I will wait here for some more comments for me to riff on or talk about or engage with. But if there isn't, some more, stuff that can be really controversial to the overall um, overall conversation here, then I will cut this a little bit short. Uh, I love punk rock. There's actually some really great punk rock YouTube channels. I tried desperately to get a couple of these people on, but I just was ignored. So we'll see. Let's see. Trill Bellinger, Pantera helped revive metal at the time when radio was dominated by grunge, though they're not really punk. No, Pantera is not punk. Pantera is like a thrash metal band or a speed metal band. Um, I wouldn't really consider them to be in the category of punk rock music at all, but they're a heavy metal band, and they're like a thrash metal. I mean, they're like in the genre of maybe a more experimental thrash metal, but nonetheless thrash in my opinion. All right, let's see. Music, movies, and more with Brian says, thank you for the fun engagement. I will see you next time. All right, well, it seems like we have people dropping out here. So it seems as though Thrash Pondo really makes your live stream a dynamic duo. Yeah, I know. And his new computer is awesome. I mean, we didn't have any delays, but as everybody can see, when he was here on his old computer, there was that delay again, which I really feel like. And then when he would talk, it would go into that kind of computer sound, and then you could only hear half of what he's saying, which I feel really kind of, it doesn't help the overall conversation. But hopefully next week we'll be back on track, and I'm gonna hope that I'm going to have the wherewithal to send him the new link so he can go back to hitting these comments as well. So it was just a matter of those things, you know, being up to date and up to speed. All right, let's see. Let's see. Retro Serial, what do you think about Phantasma's director's cut? Is a favorite of mine, and Mike Patton and Buzz Osborne really got me with that one, and some old school punk riffs in some of it. Um, Phantasmus. I guess that's a movie. I think that's the movie where they had the balls or something like that. I've not seen it in a long time. Mike Patton, obviously brilliant. Mike Patton was one of those. Mike Patton and and Faith No More was one of the bands that I did start listening to before Nirvana. They were one of those bands that came alongside with the Violent Femmes and stuff that I was very, very interested in. Actually, probably I think I said I was into. Well, they came along about the same time that I started listening to the Violent Femmes. So I was a super, super big fan of them. But I don't really know their contribution. You probably know about more of their contribution to that movie. And Buzz Osborne, yeah, of course, awesome, from the Melvins, right? If I'm remembering correctly. Um, uh, uh, Awesome people, awesome people. I really don't know how much more to say. If you see Cindy on another channel, please let her know that I did acknowledge her, and I totally apologize for not acknowledging her. Let her know that I can't tell her how badly I feel about it, and it wasn't purposeful whatsoever. I know that when something like that happens to you once, you go, "Oh, it's just a um, it's just a fluke." And the second time that happens, you wonder if there's some problem. And please let her know if you see her, if you can, by all means. And I'll try to reach out to her. I do believe that I have her email. Um, let's see. Sean Innes says, "Well, Phantasm is a super group. Director's cut borrows from a lot of movie soundtracks. You would love it. Phantasms." All right. Well, I will look into it. I will definitely look into it, for sure. Let's see. Superplex, right? ENC, have you seen the Avatar movie yet? It sounds like another Hollywood money grab. Hated the first one. Don't think I'll watch the second one. Yeah, I'm a dum dum like that. I don't like it. You know that unatanium? You know why they called it unatanium? Because nobody tells James Cameron when he has a bad idea. That's right. I said it. I don't care. I didn't like the first one. Thought it was way overrated. Thought it was weird. I didn't think it was cool. Thought it was weird. Okay. I mean, he sticks his hair into this other girl's hair and they copulate. And then he sticks his hair into this animal. Like, what's going on there? You know? Ugh. It's just I don't want to end on a bad note or anything like that, but no. I know everybody liked Avatar, and I was one of those strange people who watched Avatar and just honestly couldn't stand it. So, I mean, it was cool. The visual effects were cool, and it was cool that it was in 3D. I got to see it in the movie theater, so all that was awesome. But as far as the movie goes, I found it super uneventful, super uninteresting, super corny, super silly. Saw it once, will never watch it again, and I will not go to see the second one unless somebody special wants to go see it with me, then I'll go see it because I'm a sucker like that. Anyway, all right. What else? Oh man. All right, folks. I think uh let's see. Are there really anybody who likes that? A lot of people liked Avatar. I just wasn't one of them. Um, all right, everybody. I think we're good. We're coming up on the hour and a half mark, which is about all I can do to sit in one spot. I can't sit in one spot for more than an hour and a half. It sucks. Restaurants, whatever. Well, movies I can. But even in movies, I'll start to wiggle. I'll have to get up and go use the bathroom and stuff like that. All right, folks. I will talk to you all real soon. I'm going to be, just so you know, I'm going to be traveling back to Utah. Oh, I've got some people lined up for a couple shows going on next week and the week after. I'm going to be talking to a friend of mine about X-Men, and we're going to be talking about X-Men, the cartoon and stuff in the 80s and 90s. And then I'm going to be talking to somebody else the week after that, hopefully, about late night. Johnny Carson, David Letterman. Hey, what's more iconic than growing up there? So we're going to be talking about all that stuff with another friend of mine. And so those are going to be on the horizon here real soon. But things are going to be a little sketchy because I am traveling back to Utah in a week or so, and be there for a bit, and then I'll be back. All right, everyone. Hey, thanks so much. You guys are great. We'll talk to you all real soon. Take care, everybody.